Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and I'm glad to hear my colleagues on the other side of the aisle talk about how difficult it's going to be for these agencies, and not for the agencies, for the people who work in these agencies, and furloughs and families and so forth, all of whom we care about deeply. Please sign on to the legislation that I introduced this morning that says, in fact, what we will do is we will provide a FEMA $32 million, a disaster relief fund, a 20% increase to federal assistance, increase the agency's ability to support response and recovery. Secret Service will do overtime pay for agents. That's in the bill. Coast Guard, we were going to pay, for Coast Guard. So my colleague from Hawaii pointed this out. This is not about all of you. It's not about your folks. We can take care of them. We agreed to do that in the bill. This is about ICE reform. And I might add that, as I say, where is the secretary? My colleagues on the other side of the aisle need to know that during the shutdown, she bought 2 private jets, came out of the Coast Guard money. 2 private jets to fly all over the United States, okay? So why wasn't that money used for Coast Guard and for the families there? And if there is, the other point needs to be made here is 47 days of training. And there's also a $50,000 signing bonus for folks in ICE. $50,000. Who's going to, and who are we recruiting? Who are we recruiting with those incentives? I said, if there is a shutdown, it will be the responsibility of Republican leadership. The public blamed you in the last go-round. They're going to blame you now because you want to take responsibility for what ICE is doing. You will bear that responsibility, and what the public feels about what's happening with ICE and CBP that are terrorizing U.S. citizens and beating up and harassing American citizens around the country. It is about reforming ICE. That is what this issue is about. Now, I want to ask a few questions of FEMA, if I might. First of all, I wish my colleagues had been so vocal in the spring, and so vocal during the shutdown about all of the difficulties that your folks were having. They were not very vocal about that. And they did not speak up. Secretary Noem was brave enough to appear before us last May. Where is she now? And I asked her if President Trump was planning to eliminate FEMA, and she replied, and this was a quote, "FEMA, as it exists today, should be eliminated." I told you my story about the senior official who came, who then was summarily fired. To Administrator Phillips, do you think FEMA should be eliminated?
I think that Secretary Noem and President Trump have made clear that they believe that FEMA needs specific and detailed transformation.
Okay.
And I not only concur with that, but they asked me to come here and implement that.
Okay.
We're working through it since I've been here, or since I've been at FEMA. We've done, let's see, three major declarations.
You answered my question. So let me go on. You may have to, the actions under Secretary Noem's tell a different story. FEMA's tried to cancel billions of dollars in grants for communities across this country. $4 billion in BRIC, building resilience infrastructure in communities, been promised to communities like mine. In my district, cancellation of a BRIC program has jeopardized $25 million that New Haven was awarded to protect our downtown against damage from flooding as we face increasingly serious storms. In Crisfield, Maryland, not far from here, $36 million lost in flood protection initiative with a town budget of only $4 million. A quote, "We're pretty much devastated. Without this, we know that we will be in a really bad position to protect our citizens, protect our property, protect our community, really to protect our way of life." A coalition of 20 states filed suit against the administration over its decision to shut down BRIC. December 11th, a federal judge in Massachusetts ruled that the administration cannot terminate the BRIC program or redistribute its money for other purposes. FEMA still has not restored funding for the BRIC projects. The BRIC program directly supports strengthening communities across all 50 states. When will FEMA comply with the court orders to restore the BRIC program? And why has the administration not approved hazardous mitigation funding for any disaster since last March?
First of all, I've only been here for about 45 days. So what I'll tell you is that the directives that have been offered to me or presented to me by President Trump and Secretary Noem have been to...
Excuse me for interrupting, but I am going to do that. You've been here for 45 days, and I read your testimony, and you can tell me about a bloated agency, about this, that, or the next thing. You're there 45 days. What about the people who have waiting? We heard about Iowa's waiting for money. Hawaii is waiting for money. Everyone is waiting for money. Quite frankly, you cannot really talk about this agency if you have 45 days experience with it. You talked to me about FEMA having cut red tape. New York Times reported the backlog of disaster relief claims is $17 billion, and it attributes that to processing delays to Secretary Noem's requirement that any expenditure of $100,000 or more must be approved by her office. The claims place tremendous strain on state and local governments. That is what is happening. It is they're based on the assurances that FEMA would reimburse a share of the cost. The delays are preventing disaster-stricken communities from starting recovery projects. Recently reported that the backlog, is that number accurate in the backlog of $17 billion? Do you know?
I'm well aware, but the
Do you know whether it's a $17 billion backlog?
the challenges that are being faced currently are related to, mostly to some of the misspending and some of the program integrity
I know you're going to blame
initiatives
the
that need
prior
to be.
administration, but you tell me now, is it $17 billion that you have in the backlog? If it's not 17, what is the number? How much is in final review that is waiting for Secretary Noem's approval? That is what we need to do. You know, we provided special authority under the continuing resolution for FEMA to spend up to $22.5 billion to address its backlog, meet the needs of our communities. Why have you only used, I don't know how much? Do we have any report of how much money you have used? You don't seem to know whether it's $17 billion or what the hell the number is.
I know exactly what the number is.
What is it?
The challenge is that you're not willing to consider the answer. The answers are much more nuanced, much more complex than just what's out there.
Numbers.
I can
This is
tell
an
you this, ma'am.
Appropriations Committee. How much, what is the number, what is the backlog? What is that backlog? How much of it's being spent? How much is under review? We need to know that because we gave you authority under the last continuing resolution.
In the 45 days I've been here, ma'am, we have spent $3 billion in 45 days on 5,000 projects. We're going as fast as we can. We're committed to reducing the backlog. I can't go any faster than we actually are. And if this lapses, that's going to stop.
Well, let me just say this to you. It does not have to lapse. It doesn't have to lapse. But
Above
you've
my
got
pay grade,
folks
ma'am.
who want to, and you probably may be of the same view. I don't know. But we want to protect your agencies. We have provided money to your agencies. And we've been doing that. And it's been having to approve contracts over $100,000, backlogs, flying around the country in 2 jets with money coming from the Coast Guard. It is an abomination. And let me just tell you, and it's because under this administration and this secretary that all of these things are happening. You have an opportunity, and you can talk to the people who are here. Sign on to the legislation that protects Coast Guard, that protects TSA, the workers who are out there. We want to make sure that you are paid. CISA, we want to take care of Secret Service, give them overtime pay, and we want to provide the $32 million to FEMA. That is what we can do. That is what the Appropriations Committee does. And what we shouldn't be doing is have people defending an agency that is lawless and rogue and terrifying people all over this nation. I yield back.
Oh, I don't even get to say anything. Since I went over a minute and a half, I was